Hey everybody, it's Brady Oltmans. How we doing? Uh, crazy time, y'all. Uh, welcome to Portal Watch. Here we are. Its transfer portal officially closes on Sunday, so I figured now would be a good time to welcome everybody in, and we're going to keep an eye on it together this afternoon. It's a little droopy here in Lincoln, so I'm hunkered down in the home office, and we're going to figure things out. As we stand right now, about 2:13 p.m. On Friday, Central Time, that is, about 11 portal entries have happened in the spring window here. That, as most recently, includes quarterback Casey Thompson, who could have entered the portal at any time as a graduate transfer since he graduated last December, but announced his entry into the portal. I guess he confirmed Hail Varsity confirmed his entry into the portal today. He hasn't made an announcement as of now, but we can confirm his entry into the transfer portal. We'll be keeping an eye on it here, basically for about the next 2 hours. We're going to stick with me. We'll be here kind of going over things. Plus, if you've got any questions, we've got comments, things laid out there. I'll kind of periodically remind you in case we got any late stragglers and people coming in. So feel free to use this as kind of a Q&A in downtimes. You can also watch me text and answer emails and do all that fun stuff that it takes to make all this happen. Plus, there's the NFL draft happening, not right now, but they are in between rounds. It picks up again tonight. We'll have a couple of Huskers who may or may not be drafted starting tonight. It's a lot more likely that they'll be drafted tomorrow. Either way, I'm open for any questions or anything that anybody's got regarding those. Plus, every morning so far on hailvarsity.com, I've had my spring recap or spring stories kind of still coming out from last week's red-white game. Feel free to ask any questions away regarding the spring game or Nebraska spring season in general. Quick reminder, if you're curious or question us on any one of those things, Hail Varsity's YouTube page has plenty of post-game, post-practice, practice recaps, everything like that. Go over to the mothership of hailvarsity.com. We've got plenty of stories, plenty of coverage for Nebraska's spring season and throughout winter conditioning, things like that. Plenty of recap from last week's red-white game. And while you're there, there's plenty of other things happening in the world of Husker sports right now. I know that there's a lot going on in football. Trust me, I understand that. But we've also got Nebraska volleyball scrimmage happening in Central City tomorrow. We'll have plenty of coverage there on that. We've got Husker baseball, Husker softball, all that stuff happening right now. Not to mention, you've got basketball. I think both men's and women's Nebraska basketball teams are still finalizing their rosters. So we'll have any sort of news coming out there as it happens. Shout out Jacob Padilla and Drake Keeler. Both of them hold it down on those beats. They're doing great. So follow them too. This is either going to go pretty well, just fine, or it's going to drop like a lead balloon. So I'm excited to see how this happens. Like I said, we're going to be hanging out here doing this until about 4 p.m. just to kind of get you primed, prepped, ready for Schmidt and Elijah to take over with Hail Varsity Radio when that kicks off at about 4 p.m. its usual time slot. So with that, I'm gonna tweet this bad boy out, and we're gonna circle the wagons, and hopefully everybody can follow along, ask questions if you want to, and we'll keep watching on that portal watch here. This is an exciting new endeavor. Let me take a sip of my tea here. Yeah, I hope that picked up. Hope that worked. Well, this ought to be a good thing. We'll recap kind of how the spring has gone so far via portal transfers. We'll kind of go alphabetical order. That's how we've got it arranged right now on hailvarsity.com for those who are interested and want to read along hailvarsity.com on the homepage. The main story right now is our updated spring portal tracker with Casey Thompson's photo as the main font. As a centerpiece photo, I should say. First one up is Alante Brown. He is the former, or I guess he's still a receiver, former Nebraska receiver. He has not been with the team since January. He was one of the options for Nebraska over the last couple of years. Former 4-star recruit who formally entered the portal when the portal opened up last week. I guess it would have been a little bit over a week ago. I don't know. He was the first Husker to enter the portal. I know that his timeline wise, I don't know if it was a big surprise or not, considering he hadn't been with the team, hadn't worked out with the team. I know that there was an olive branch, or at least an understanding, where if Alante wanted to return to Nebraska, he could. Ultimately, he declared for the portal, and as of now, he has not decided where he will end up. I know that he's got plenty of offers from around. There's some Group of 5, I should say, Group of 5 offers floating around there. He's also visited East Lansing in Michigan State a couple of times. I mean, he is a Chicago native, so it's not super long ways away, if that makes sense. He's also picked up an offer from Purdue, transfer within the Big Ten and play at Purdue. So that's one to keep an eye on. James Carney, the Norris graduate, officially entered the portal last week. He's one of those guys that was promising, but through coaching changes, roster shuffles, all of that, just really couldn't find the field. He also, on his own accord, did not join or left the program before the spring practices really got going. So, one of those guys that he wanted to stick it through because he maybe liked Nebraska, maybe he wanted to see firsthand how things are going to be under the new head coach and the new head coaching staff, and just and decided that he wanted to find his college football fortunes elsewhere. Braxton Clark is another one who kind of, he's another one that kind of almost gets lost in the shuffle. Nebraska has a lot of defensive backs, a lot of people in the secondary. Head coach Matt Rule has talked about that as being, he kind of joked about it, saying that they've got more, defensive backs than anybody else in the country. So I would still say at this point, the secondary and defensive back, there's going to be a lot of fight to the field. There might be one or two more portal entries from there. If there are any more, I would say defensive backs are the most likely candidates. But Braxton Clark, the Orlando native, he actually made 4 tackles in the red-white game, stuck around, and then in their one-on-one talks, when the coaching staff had their talks with the players one-on-one this week, kind of once he understood where the coaching staff was coming from, their visions for him in the future and building, ended up wanting to enter the portal. So I know this coaching staff has always said, hey, guys want to enter the portal, we'll be supportive of them. Can't do anything about it other than be supportive of them, help them out, find out where they want to go. I think you've already found that with Richard Torres and the things that he is, and him entering the portal, them kind of helping him with his tape, helping him get all that he needs to get going on. Apologies if you hear a really whiny dog here. We played a little bit this morning, but it's a busy time, so he hasn't got to run around and play. And it's really droopy outside. I mean, the last time we took a walk, he was really kind of dragging. So he hasn't been able to run around the way he wants to. Sean Hardy, the second wide receiver, and another one, he never really played. Didn't see any snaps at Nebraska at all in 2 seasons. He was offensive scout team player of the year, not this last year, but in 2021. So you kind of got the idea that, especially with him being like one of the top 100 recruits from the receiver position, at least in his recruiting class, that he'd kind of build up a little bit of steam at Nebraska, but he never really broke through in the field. And then obviously receiver is a pretty loaded group, at least veteran heavy group. this year for Nebraska. So he didn't get a catch or anything in the red-white game, and it was just one of those where he just saw greener pastures elsewhere, and it's a loaded room. I mean, to be frank, that's wide receiver is a pretty stacked room right now. So same thing for Victor Jones. Didn't play at all last season. He had 2 catches in the red-white game, but another one where, just a redshirt freshman young guy who has a lot of potential and a lot of things that could happen elsewhere, but through the veteran aspect of this recruiting staff, right, or I guess coaching staff right now in the wide receiver room, they've got a pretty veteran heavy group, and then they've got a handful of the speedy, bright freshmen that'll be coming in the fall. So between those two, I think they're just, playing time is limited at that point. Another one that entered the portal earlier today, Noah Pola-Gates. That one, he's a veteran in Nebraska. I know he's a very nice young man, very good ball player. I've enjoyed all my interactions with him. That's one that, if, again, with the defensive backfield being the way it is, it's stacked. I mean, you got guys moving around, and in a new scheme, maybe, Noah just saw himself wanting to play in a different scheme, wanting to play or a little bit more immediate playing time, more snaps, something like that. But he, a former 4-star recruit, did everything that I think the coaching staff has asked of him in his time. He spent 4 years at Nebraska. He played like some 20 games over those 4 years, most of them in special teams roles. So maybe he gets a chance somewhere else to really shine in a final season in the defensive backfield. Which kind of leads us to, actually, I'll skip ahead to defensive line. Stephon Wynn Jr. was one that entered the portal. That might have been the biggest surprise, if there is really a big surprise. He played really well, I thought, last year, and then in the spring game, he surprised again. He kind of had like a complementary role within that defense last year, and then the coaching staff really talked highly of him this spring. They said that he's a guy that's been working hard, working on the details. He wants to get to the NFL. Terrence Knighton has been to the NFL. They're kind of similar interior defensive linemen. And he had 5 tackles in the red-white game. That's after 22 tackles all of last season, but ultimately entered the transfer portal. We'll see where he ends up. Maybe he's a little bit more of an anchor defensive interior guy, and he can find a scheme that fits him a little bit better. I guess so far 4 quarterbacks have entered the transfer portal, 3 of them on scholarship. The one that's not is Jarrett Sinek, the Hastings High graduate, walk-on, who at some point through injuries and everything last season ended up number 3 on the depth chart, traveling to Michigan, and he actually played in the Big House last year in Ann Arbor, seeing fourth quarter action there after Casey Thompson already injured. Chubba Purdy goes down with a high ankle sprain, and then they take off Logan Smothers once the game kind of gets away from them and hits that 30 or 28, 31 point differential there. He just, he wasn't really with the team at all during the spring. So maybe he took that as an opportunity of saying, like, hey, I've staked my claim. I can play, in Michigan. I can play at a big stage, and maybe he can go get a scholarship somewhere else. Richard Torres and the portal, like I said, he's another a Texas Tie guy. So you'd almost think like the Matt Rule coaching staff knew who they had when they got him, and really big arm, promising young man. He really couldn't get up to speed in Mark Whipple's offense last year. And along with that being his first year at the college game, he suffered a knee injury in his senior year of high school too. So he really hasn't played, hasn't been the guy at quarterback for a couple of years now, playing significant, consistent snaps. He was a 3-star, like I said, 3-star with a big arm. He's got some mobility to him, and you see it from the film. He can throw it. Even in the spring practices that we saw, he could sling it a little bit. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if he ends up somewhere where he can be a pretty solid quarterback somewhere else. Logan Smothers is one. He's still injured, not cleared to play at all, but he entered the transfer portal. He's a former 4-star quarterback who has kind of played complementary backup roles the last 2 seasons and for a total of 11 games. He backed up both Adrian Martinez and Casey Thompson. Played mostly that number 3 role last year, although if you remember correctly, they had a package built for him in Ireland whenever they wanted a little bit more mobile, bruising quarterback designed runs. They went to Logan, and after Northwestern, they kind of got away from that. I think he ran a little bit in North Dakota, I want to say, if I remember correctly. There's a lot going on in the brain right now. But he is reportedly to have entered the portal, keeping his options open, potentially could, especially with the quarterback shuffling that happened since he entered, could withdraw his name and return to Nebraska. Which brings us back to Casey Thompson, last year's starting quarterback, who has endured a whole lot of injury over the course of last season. And then he comes up and requires shoulder surgery in the offseason. As far as I know, and every indication I've gotten, he's been back on track, and there's been no hampering of his recovery. I think he posted some videos of him throwing in the Hawks Championship Center. He was back throwing to some degree at the end of spring ball, but obviously they didn't have him going live in the red-white game, or didn't have him at all competing in the red-white game. He was on the sidelines with a headset like he was for the other 2 scrimmages that they had during the spring. Matt Rule has talked highly about him and his willingness and coachability, and Casey Thompson was in there studying the playbook, talking with teammates every day. One of the first ones in, last one's out, is what multiple Huskers have said. But Thompson ultimately, like I said, he could have really entered the portal at any time. Being a grad transfer, the portal window rules don't apply to graduate transfers. So since he got his master's degree back in December, he could have entered the portal at any time. I think he kind of wanted to stick it out, wanted to compete. I can tell you firsthand that he viewed the Nebraska quarterback job as his to lose. And then I think at this point, late April, ultimately decided that a change of scenery has to be the best for himself, his career. So he will compete one more year of college ball somewhere else at this point. I guess, feasibly he could withdraw his name, I suppose. But as of today, he has entered his name in the transfer portal. I believe that's all of it. Yeah. Gotcha, Cam. Perfect. Yeah, let me know if I'll do a little less. I'll do less with the hands, less with the arms here. All right, that's where we're at right now. Like I said, 11 in the portal. I think Nebraska still has a couple more to get down to the 85 limit. Right now, without looking heavily into my notes, I couldn't tell you exactly how many that is. They were hovering at 98 total, so they need to be around 11. So I think they've got, 98 total, but that did not include Alante Brown in that number. So they're probably looking at 89, if I remember correctly. Because I counted up scholarship numbers, not at the most recent portal numbers. So they're looking at about 89 right now on scholarship, having to get down to the 85 level. And then I believe the coaching staff kind of keeps a little window for in case any new surprise transfers happen between now and Sunday when the portal closes. They've got a couple of guys that they can potentially bring in as portal arrivals at that point. This is probably a good time to just mention that the portal closes on Sunday, but players, just non-graduate transfers, have until Sunday to enter. They don't have to pick their new destination by then. They just have to officially enter the transfer portal by Sunday, or at least by the end of Sunday. It's a 15-day window, closes at the conclusion of the 30th of April. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. They don't have to have their destination picked out. That could potentially bleed into May. I know, like, O'Shawn Mathis committed about this time last year because he waited and took in the Nebraska spring game a little bit. Just not a little bit, in total. He was here for the spring game last year and then decided on Nebraska, then committed at the end of April, and then came over after spring ball. So, yeah, I mean, if anything comes up, if any new destinations happen, we'll also have you covered over at Hail Varsity, hailvarsity.com, Hail Varsity Radio, Hail Varsity YouTube. Just go ahead and subscribe. I don't know why you haven't already. It's a great deal. And we give you a magazine. We've got some special things planned this summer, not only with our annual yearbook, which is kind of basically a double issue looking at the upcoming football season. We've got a couple of other fun things planned. And then every month after that, we'll have a new issue out for you. I can tell you right now, it's a lot of spring recaps. We're looking to recap the academic year in total this last year throughout all sports in Nebraska. You're going to have plenty of volleyball, football, basketball, baseball, softball. I mean, there's plenty of things going on over here. So we'll have you covered in any of those outfits. Still no breaking news really on the portal, which I'm not complaining about. Let's be honest with you. I am tired. But yeah, that's where it's at right now. Let's see. I think that takes care of all of the housework, cleaning and everything going on. Let's see here. Let's get this bad boy all out. Really, 9 people watching? Oh man, you guys DM me or tweet at me or something. You guys deserve a medal for this one, I tell you. Crying out loud. All right. All right. Perfect. Okay. All right. I gotta move my hoodie. It's a great, really comfy hoodie, but I tell you what, man. Comfort comes at a cost some of these times. I tell you what. Let's see. All right. I'll put a bookmark in that one so I can read that later. That'll be good. David Erickson asks, with the portal closing on Sunday, does Casey have to decide his new school by then? No. It's a really good question. I think I touched on it earlier, but we just tweeted this out, so we might have some new arrivals. The portal rules are, again, for anyone new who comes in, the portal rules are that the portal closes on Sunday at the end of April 30th. That is just the deadline to enter the portal. For those who are in, they don't have to make a decision by then. They just have to enter into the portal. They don't have to pick their new destination by then. They can take as long as they want on that. I know, like I kind of mentioned, O'Shawn Mathis entered the portal last year about this time and then committed on April 30th, if my numbers are correct there. And after watching Nebraska's spring game last season. So Casey could ostensibly redact his name and withdraw from the portal. But with him in, he's also a graduate transfer. So he really isn't bound by portal windows and deadlines. Any sort of graduate transfer, those who get their degree don't have to enter the portal through the conventional window times. Casey graduated in December with his master's degree, so he could have entered earlier, but he chose to. I think today it became known, and we could report that he is entering the transfer portal. So curious to see where he goes. Honestly, there's a lot of capable targets. I mean, a lot of schools are looking for quarterbacks. I know one person, a friend of mine over at ESPN, mentioned Okie State as a potential landing spot just because of the Oklahoma ties. I don't know if I really see him that well in that system. Obviously, Husker fans are very familiar with Zane Flores. Potentially, fighting for that starting spot already, in his first year on campus there. So that'll be an interesting one to watch. I know another high caliber school that Casey could potentially end up at is Auburn. But those are just some ones that, big time schools with an opening school. Casey didn't have the greatest year last year, but he's also hampered by injuries, learning a new system. Of course, he'd be learning a new system wherever he goes, basically. But it's a little different. Mark Whipple's system's a tough one to kind of adjust to on the fly and then start in right away. So he also withstood all of that, withstood all the injuries. He's coming off with a fresh, clean shoulder. He was in Nebraska's study rooms learning this offense, learning Marcus Satterfield's offense. A lot of his teammates said that he was in there, one of the first ones in, last ones out. So he's a studious guy. He's going to do what he can to learn. I am somewhat surprised that he didn't try to stick it out and compete because he is a competitor. But I think he sees opportunity for himself elsewhere. And I know he reached out to PJ Walker, Charlie Brewer, two quarterbacks that really thrived under Matt Rule's coaching tenures at Temple and Baylor. Right around the time Matt Rule got introduced as head coach, and he was studying film. So he was aware of what he was getting into. He did his best to study the system and what he was getting into. And then ultimately led to the decision that he was going to enter the transfer portal right now. So it'll be really curious. Like I said, he's the portal window now is kind of interesting. You see a lot of movement. Bigger schools are seeing guys move around. Tyler Buckner just went to Alabama from Notre Dame. That's an interesting one, especially since Sam Hartman transferred over to Notre Dame. And you got Tommy Rees basically recruiting his old guy. And I think it was shout out Andy Staples. I think they were talking on his show earlier this week of like, well, if he believed in Tyler Buckner to win the Notre Dame job and to be a top tier quarterback, why did he bring in Sam Hartman? And now he's bringing in Tyler Buckner into Alabama. So it's a fascinating time for quarterbacks in this transfer portal. And like I said, the portal in general is kind of just fascinating for quarterbacks. But yeah, I think that's where Casey finds himself now. Logan and Jarrett and Richard are all entering the portal this time around with kind of various outlooks. Jarrett could be a very kind of interesting portal arrival. Richard Torres, again, big arm, mobile kid with a lot of years of eligibility left to learn the system, find out where he's comfortable. He's an intriguing guy. And then obviously Nebraska fans saw what Logan Smothers is capable of. Interested to see who takes a chance on him and says like, hey, we're going to invest in you instead of just being in the kind of backup role. Kind of curious to see how he goes there. Plus how he looks, coming off of injury. I think that's for me always an interesting thing is seeing how guys not only look physically but confidence wise coming off of an injury. So maybe just a fresh start for him somewhere would be good. So that's a really long-winded answer. I got carried away with that one, but Hey, we got time to kill here, folks. Hey, Mr. Varsity, long-time listener, first-time caller. What are the thoughts on portal departure so far? I don't really think that there's really one that's really truly surprised me. Like I mentioned to someone else earlier today, Casey Thompson on a scale from 1 to 10 is almost almost a 4, I would say. He, like I said, he's a competitor. I am somewhat surprised that he wasn't there, trying to compete for that job that he, viewed as his to retain throughout the summer. But he could have, as his graduate transfer, he could have declared at any time to leave, and he posted, great things on Instagram, inspirational things. I know he's big on the inspirational kick, inspirational quotes, biblical quotes, all of that. And then I think he ultimately just came to the decision that maybe a fresh start someplace else would, for one more year, would be a good spot for him. That's kind of the similar way. A lot of the portal guys look like ones that just couldn't crack the roster through the Scott Frost tenure. And then obviously if there's a coaching change, there's just going to be a different philosophical view on who they need to fit in where, whose skill sets fit in where the best. And it's kind of like, how did I describe this to somebody? Like, he's sleeping on the ground. I kind of describe it as just like, you're basically taking over a car, and you can kind of assemble and change things up. You can put some aftermarket parts on it, but at the same time, you got to ride the engine and take that with you as long as you can until, the engine's gone. Get a new starter. You can put in new parts, but wholesale, you got to ride that car until it's done. You know what I mean? So they're going to recruit, and they're already recruiting guys to fit their offensive and defensive systems. I know that they are encouraged by the athletes that they have in now, both offensive and defensive. They like the players that they have in. They obviously are smart enough to know that they've got a couple of people they're keeping an eye on in the portal in case there are any super surprise transfers that come up. But in terms of my overall thoughts, I think I gave most of them, but the biggest surprise so far is Wynn, Stephon Wynn Jr. transferring. I think he's a guy that you just heard the coaches speak highly of throughout the spring. Seemed like he would be a good fit, not only coming from Alabama and then playing well, I thought well at times last year on that defensive interior. He seemed encouraged to be learning under Terrence Knighton, another former NFL defensive interior lineman. He seemed to really enjoy it. I think we just talked with him maybe a week and a half before the red-white game, and he seemed to really enjoy it. So that one's probably the one, if I were to kind of grade or move them around on the tier list, that's the one that would surprise me the most, probably is him. But good on him. He also said that the NFL is the goal. So if he sees that happen somewhere else, then he's going to go for it. Sorry, my phone be blowing up, folks. Let's see here. All right. Oh boy. Well, we've made it 25 minutes before my voice requires more tea, so that's good. Okay. Well, hello, Mr. Varsity again. Mr. and Mrs. Varsity. Thoughts on where we could see additions made for Nebraska and any areas of focus from my perspective. I think both areas of the line are ones that stand out to me. I know Matt Rule got asked specifically in terms of offensive line depth after the red-white game, where he thought they lined up on that, and he kind of brushed it off. He said that they've got who they want. They really don't need any more bodies. He mentioned earlier in the spring that they like who they have now, and then they'll have more people coming in. I believe he meant in reference to the
the big line heavy 2023 class who weren't early enrollees. I know he's talked highly about Gunner from Lincoln Southeast, who has stood out as an early enrollee on the offensive line. But obviously, for me personally, offensive and defensive line are two tough ones if you try to get a true freshman in there. That's not a knock on anyone or Gunner or anybody like that. Like I'm not saying that they're not good. They are. Clearly they are, and they can really thrive. But to ask somebody to get up to the speed of the college game and then the size of competing against other Big Ten linemen right away, that's a tough ask. It's not impossible, but history tells me, they're you're it's going to take a really exceptional young person to step into that role and deliver on a big plane. So I think they like the offensive line. We haven't seen any portal departures through this window through the offensive line, but they looked at a handful of offensive linemen in the last portal. They only got Ben Scott to come in. They had Walter Rouse, they thought for a little bit, and then he ended up transferring to Oklahoma. Then Micah Mazuka left. I think he was at Baylor, left, transferred over to Florida. So they brought people in, and they only ended up with one of them. That is pretty much the only real reason that I'm thinking they might look at the offensive line. I did that recruiting notebook for those curious, hailvarsity.com. We have a recruiting notebook every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday evening. I did a recent one, I believe on Tuesday evening, about the potential portal pickups that Nebraska could get just based upon social media interactions. All of them mentioned are followed by Nebraska's official recruiting Twitter account. And then you had assistant coaches and various personnel positions following various other portal arrivals or portal recruits now. They had already officially entered the portal. The other one is defensive line. There were a couple who I mentioned in that story, the couple that fit that mold. They are, by large parts, bigger but more mobile, more shifty, dynamic, guys that can move laterally a little bit more, but still big bodies on the interior. They've got Nebraska has a really good edge rusher, and the edge rusher linebacker hybrid, the kind of fluidity that they like to play with. They've got a lot of bodies and a lot of people that can fit in that position right now. So that's one that I think they're probably good at, especially considering Prince Will Umamielen and Cameron Lenhart and Maverick Noonan, all those guys stepping in, playing well. Jamari Butler played well in that position. I think they feel good where they're at there. If they're really looking to assure any part, it would be getting a big time body on the defensive interior. That's just me. That's just me personally. But also we got some reporting to back it up now. Like I said, if you're curious about that, check Tuesday's recruiting notebook, hailvarsity.com, where we kind of take a look at who those potential pickups could be. I think one or two have announced their commitments since that story went up. So that's not like a wish list at any point right now, but they're just some names to keep an eye on. Obviously, to harken back to it, more names could enter the portal up until Sunday, so this could be a frantic finish, even though Casey Thompson and Noah Pola-Gates entering the transfer portal this morning kind of grabbed the headlines. I've been working in journalism for well over a decade now. The Friday news dump does not exist solely in the hard news world. You get it here in sports as well. So I would not be surprised if we get any late arrivals. And like I said, that's kind of why we're doing this right now, to answer your questions, to keep an eye on the portal, to keep an eye on any sort of potential movements that happen that way, and just to help get you away from the office, help keep your ears off of work, focus on something else before Chris and Elijah get you going with Hail Varsity Radio yet this evening. So yeah, it should be good. It's not quite breaking news, but Gareth Bale turned down the boys over at Wrexham for an offer to come out of retirement, which I don't know. To be full disclosure, I love soccer, but I have not watched that show yet. I haven't done much show watching, movie watching. I know my collection behind me begs to differ, but I got most of those working on a farm growing up. Um, when you live about an hour away from most anything, but you have your own landscaping business, and you make, some okay money, you end up going to movie gallery and buying 5 previewed movies for $20. You can collect a lot of movies that way. Then that's how I got where I am now. But yeah, like I said, Ted Lasso is another one. It's on my list. Gonna watch it. That's a summer watch for me. So that one and Welcome to Wrexham are 2 on my summer watches. All right, another question. Hopefully the last one for now. Looking at the portal landscape, what are the thoughts on portage of players? Everyone's talked Colorado, but have any other programs surprised? It's a really interesting question. It's a really interesting dynamic because I remember talking with a couple of my colleagues that cover college football on a national scale, and looking at the caliber of portal athlete that would enter in the spring. I thought there could be some bigger names, but on a grander scale, you're probably seeing people who either through spring ball, with all the, especially with the coaching carousel changing the way that they did, people who kind of got lost in the shuffle and aren't going to be a part of the same kind of teams that they got recruited to initially. And then I think shout out Brandon Vogel, the great Brandon Vogel, for mentioning, backing up the stats to kind of support that. There are some stars in this portal window so far, but on average, you're seeing less 5-star, 4-star athletes enter the portal this spring window than you did back in the winter. I think one of the big names that jumped out was Bear Alexander transferring from Georgia USC. That was another one that it's just a big name. Georgia clearly pumps out 5-star recruits, and when you have that sort of high caliber recruiting, not everybody is going to stick around. A lot of these guys have been studs, since they were 14 years old on the football field. They're not used to being on the bench or being a role player. And some people think that they can be the next one that just climbs in, makes an immediate impact, and they don't. Or some think that they can buy into that role-playing role, and then they get into it in the college game and realize, it's just not what they thought it was going to be. But then also, these are young kids. They go off to college, they're still teenagers, and the experience isn't what they think it's going to be, and they want to find someplace else where they think that they can feel better, more comfortable, belong better, more a better support system within the football community and on campus in general. There's a lot that goes into it. Yeah, Colorado obviously grabs all the headlines, and for any Husker fan who thinks I'm going to say something salacious about Colorado, you're going to be out of luck here, because this is what Dion said. This is what he talked about when he has guys coming in, and it's Louis, or however that quote goes. It's just, this kind of roster turnover that we're seeing is unprecedented and hasn't happened in college football. But this was kind of the next big progression, and for a team that went 1-11 last year, let's be honest, if your team wins, if Nebraska won one game last year, you would think that maybe more portal turnover, more roster turnover would be necessary out of that. Now, at the same time, some of these guys like Montana, these guys can play, so it's not all just your 3 stars that were asked to do a lot and just couldn't keep up to speed with the Pac-12 or a Power 5 game. Some of these guys can really light it up. And that's where, at the end of the portal, at the end of April, you're going to see a lot of teams think, okay, well, if we can pluck this person, plug them into our system, get them in for summer workouts and right into before pregame, or I guess not pregame, crying out loud, fall camp, you can almost plug and play some of the guys like that, like Montana. But yeah, we're going to see a lot more turnover. But I don't know. The only real thing there is I'm really curious to see what Colorado looks like in August, because I don't know. I mean, they've got what 40 to 40 scholarship players right now. That's wild. I'm going to be really curious to see how that turns out. I don't know. I think you're also seeing like going back to Bear Alexander with USC. You've got some of these programs that were so close, so close to being in the playoff. And as the playoff expands to 12, not this upcoming year, but the one following, I think you're going to see maybe a little bit more of that. Bear Alexander is a very talented defensive lineman, and him going to USC automatically adds a weapon on defense, where USC, that was their downfall last year, was their defense. I love watching Utah play. And when Utah plays, they are just that consistent team. They could do some flashy, fun things with Cam Rising at quarterback, and their offense could spark something, but they were just a dependable defense for the most part. And it pays off. You go to the Rose Bowl with that again. You know what I mean? I think USC needs guys on the interior. They need those bruising linemen to push around a team like Utah, right? Like, you can only get so far with your skill position players. You can recruit 5-star skill position players all over the place, but if your line isn't developing and you're not able to command the line of scrimmage, those skill position players aren't able to do all that they can do, right? And I think that's kind of where USC saw some of their downfalls last year, and they're adjusting to. And obviously, they're going to have to adjust to that before they get into the Big Ten, because frankly, I'd be curious to see if they played Michigan tomorrow, what that would look like. But if Utah, I'll be honest, if Utah can exploit it, Michigan can too. So that stands out to me. Trying to narrow it down into the Big Ten. Hadn't really been a whole lot of Big Ten transfer portal movement. That surprised me a whole lot. Michigan's been quiet. They're also just on a warpath on the recruiting trail. I mean, crying out loud. You'd think that Jim Harbaugh's flirtations with the NFL would have made any sort of impact. No. Of course, it helps. They've got their heir apparent. Regardless of if Jim Harbaugh went to the NFL tonight, if he wanted to, Michigan has their head coach in waiting, coaching their offensive line right now. So that's I guess that's a positive thing to have going for him. Ohio State, clearly, I mean, Ohio State's obviously going to recruit to a high level. They've got guys in. They just sent, CJ Stroud in the draft last night. They haven't really been that active in the portal. That's another positive. You've got the same coaching staff. Essentially, Brian Hartline is going to be a really fun one to watch. He's a really talented young coach. I'm curious to see how that offense looks under him, especially considering all the great, receivers that they've got in Jackson Smith and Jigba and Marvin Harrison Jr. and crying out loud. So on and so forth. That's the benefit of consistency, not to say that that's going to guarantee that you retain players, but if you have the same coaching staff and you can sell the same vision, long-term, short-term, players see themselves in it, buy into it, and then there's going to be less. First of all, you don't have to have a big turnover in roster. You don't have to say like, hey, we're going to have a whole scale different offensive defensive system, which would require a different skill set on both sides. So there's just that consistency helps out entirely. I haven't done a deep dive on it because I haven't had time, but I can tell you right now, one thing that would be fun to do in the summer is just look at these big roster turnovers or these big transfer movements. How much of them are happening from coaches and programs who have had the same head coach and then defensive and offensive assistants, wherever that specific player came from, and how long that they had been there. Because I think if you're recruited by the same 3 people, just hypothetically speaking, if you were recruited by the same head coach, the same offensive coordinator, and same positional coach, and they're there, all 3 of them are still there, your first 3 years on campus, that would make a difference to me if I wanted to go in the portal or not. So that was story time with Brady, I guess. Okay. Not to detract from the portal for a bit, but I'm curious when you expect the first Husker to come off the board in the NFL draft. Think Palmer, but likely, but not until tomorrow. Agree or disagree? Let me ponder that as I finish my tea here. Yeah, I think Trey. I think Trey is probably the most likely to go first. All that I've heard from him is a likely 4th round pick. That's kind of where people within draft circles see him going. His speed, intangibles, he's got raw athleticism that stands out. But the big knock on him, from what I was told repeatedly, was he can't consistently catch the ball in traffic. And when you're playing against the best football players in the world, you're going to be doing it in traffic. He can create separation, but if people see him line up, they're going to think this is going to be a go route, or this we're going to have safety help over the top because this thing's going at least 15 yards. Husker fans saw that there were a couple times, where he tried to catch a slant or something on over the middle and just couldn't come up with it, and no real knock on him, honestly, because I couldn't do it, crying out loud. It takes me two tries to get out of bed in the morning sometimes. But that's kind of been the real thing from him that kind of kept him from climbing. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets drafted tonight, but from all that I've been told, 4th round is pretty much the consistent baseline for him. O'Shawn Mathis would probably be the second one. It's tough because he had a decent enough combine. He just didn't really do anything that caught eyes. He's just a consistent guy who didn't blow people away off on film. Now, obviously, he, considering the season TCU had, maybe he thought he could have fared better in that last year, and how Nebraska's defense did. Maybe didn't do him any favors just because he was cycling in. They had so many solid edge rushers with Garrett and Caleb, both of which are going to be in the NFL draft. O'Shawn is likely going to be a 5th, 6th round pick. So it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't get drafted, but there's enough intangibles. There's enough on film there that suggests that some team is going to take him. They're going to see that he needs to maybe get a little bit stronger in his lower body. He needs a little bit more leg strength to move through in order to keep up with NFL offensive line tight ends to get to the quarterback. He'd do himself a little bit more favors, honestly, if he kind of reassured his quick hands and used those a little bit better in shaking off blocks. But I could see him getting drafted as well. I think from everybody I've talked to, it's kind of up in the air if Garrett Nelson, Travis Vokolek get drafted. They're kind of on the cusp. It kind of just depends on how their positions go beforehand. I'm a firm believer in tight ends, and I think Travis has done a lot with his film that kind of helps him stand out. But I know from talking with some NFL scouts that what he really needed to do in this offseason to get, to stand out the NFL draft was to assure his run blocking. That's the one thing that drafts, or the scouts, not drafts, crying out loud, that scouts really wanted to see more from him this year was in his run blocking game. And you don't really have the opportunity to do that, at the draft or at the combine or even a pro day. But physically, he felt like he did all that he could do, both at the combine and at pro day. I know he worked out hard in Pensacola and got himself in shape competing against some other draft hopefuls. So hopefully good on him. Some team's ready to take a chance on him because he could, especially in an NFL system that fits his skill set, he could be a pretty dependable player. I mean, you see how a good tight end can carry your offense quite a bit, or at least it adds some versatility and makes, even if you're not going to be a standout all pro tight end, if you're capable enough, you're going to make life difficult for opposing defenses. And then Garrett, Garrett's a tough one because even the people who I've talked to have said, like, even if he doesn't get drafted, because he is kind of a fringe high sixth, seventh round or an undrafted free agent, however it goes, he's going to be, at OTAs, he's going to be at a mini camp because, there's enough on film. The guy wants it. He worked really hard. I know I have a story up on hailvarsity.com right now that kind of talks about his decision, and it talks about his preparations going through pro day and all of that. I kind of joked to myself because you see him at pro day and he looked good, and I just thought, man, like, obviously he did. He made the decision that was all for best for him. But for a fleeting thought, I was like, man, him with Corey Campbell for a full season, that'd have been wild. Him and this new strength and conditioning staff, that would have been a marvel. But I think he proved it. He proved at pro day what he wasn't able to prove at the combine because he didn't get an invitation. I think he said that he had talks with several NFL scouts after pro day, so he stood out. I know from following his Instagram, he's posted some things about some workouts. So I could see Garrett and Travis both getting drafted. I'd say Trey, O'Shawn, Garrett, Travis have the best likelihood of being drafted. And then after that, all of those guys, even if they don't get drafted, they're going to go to a mini camp somewhere. I'm going to run this down on one of my notepads so I make sure I have all the names and I'm not forgetting anybody, because I kind of preparing for our draft coverage here, the names I thought of. Chancellor Brewington, Chris Kolavic, Omar Manning, Caleb Tanner, Oliver Martin, Etva, Brady Weiss, Cameron Piper. Those are all guys who competed at pro day, who I think did enough to stake a case for getting invitations to camps and then in the upcoming days and weeks. Now, how long their NFL careers are. You all right there, bud? You all right? Sorry. I think he had a little cough to him too. Yeah, those are all guys I could definitely see as undrafted free agents by the end of Saturday, maybe even into Sunday, that could get a chance to do something at the NFL level. To varying degrees, I don't know, how well that would work out for any of them, but those are the ones that I could see getting a chance. So on average, maybe 3.5 Huskers get drafted, and then the rest get chances through minicamp and things like that. So, right, buddy, you're doing good. All right, what do we got? Just more NFL draft news. More draft news clogging the timeline. Okay, another question coming in. Earlier today, Casey's departure is a huge loss, saying that it leaves our quarterback room small and uncompetitive. Thoughts? I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far as to say small and uncompetitive at all. It's kind of it's just a different breed of quarterback now in the room, because you've got Jeff Sims stands out right now. It seems to be the heir apparent. Heinrich Harburg impressed coaches all throughout. Winter, spring, coaches just loved him. His athleticism, his tenacity. He didn't throw well in the red-white game. Of course, nobody really did aside from Sims. But cold up against that defense, I don't know. I'm not gonna crescent somebody's collegiate career based on one red-white spring game. And then you got Chubba, and Chubba's an interesting guy because I think the coaches said all throughout last year that he practiced really well, and seeing him in spring practice, he threw some great balls. When we were in there, you just see okay, I see it. I see why he's here. I see why people are high on him. But he, when he actually saw the field last year, he just didn't get his confidence under him and really just didn't seem assured of himself right up until that drive at the second quarter at Michigan, where he was really starting to see the game a little bit better and get his feet under him. And then with that long scramble, he's indecisive and going down and gets a high ankle sprain, and there's his season. But right up until that point, I think, which is incredibly unfortunate injury, not just in the sense that it's any injury is unfortunate, but that one right there at that time, you felt like, okay, Chuba's on, he's got some momentum to him now. If only he can, carry this through. And then you've got the walk-on Jack Walkie from Ole Miss that comes in. So it's, I get Heinrich, and this is where I'd especially push back on the notion that it's a small room. I guess small in terms of like numbers, maybe. But four quarterbacks is about, I don't know, four quarterbacks isn't super small anymore. 3 scholarship, that's about, I don't know, it might be on the lower end, but it's certainly, I wouldn't call it small. It's simply not unheard of. But Heinrich, they were talking about, or there was some talk about him potentially moving to tight end in the winter. If you got a guy that's being rumored to move to tight end in your quarterback room, guy ain't small. All right, let's be honest. And then he had, I think, the longest run of the red-white game. I think he had like a 23 yard. Yeah, got my notes right. 23 yard scamper. So I don't know. Those two could really push themselves. I'd be curious to see what Heinrich and Jeff kind of do to rival each other. Now, obviously, the coaching staff could pick up, if they wanted to, there are a couple of other quarterbacks in the portal through this window. If they wanted to pick somebody up, they could do that. They could also, again, graduate students, graduate transfers are able to transfer in at any time if they wanted to add another body that way. Obviously, they are recruiting some people in the 2024 recruiting class at quarterback. Not surprising anybody with that. So I think this is probably as small as it's going to be, but to say it's small and uncompetitive, I would think it's a bit far. It might be a reach for Heinrich to play Big Ten caliber football right now, but I think that he's, with the tools that he has shown, he has enough to be competitive at it, and he has enough to push Jeff Sims. And I keep going back to something Matt Rule said after the red-white game. Jeff Sims isn't a runner. He's a passer who runs a 4.40. Like, he can do both, but he's a passer. We just haven't seen it. None of the quarterbacks really got a chance to really get a good deep ball to him during the red-white game. I think the closest thing to it, Jeff did hit Billy Kemp on the sidelines. It ran like a 15, 18-yard hitch or out route right up against the sidelines. A good throw on time. He had one to Marcus Washington. I believe it was on the first drive. Maybe it was on the second drive for him on the white team, where he kind of threw it. And I mean, he put it where only Marcus could get to it. Marcus ended up not being able to get to it. And honestly, it was pretty good defensive coverage on that one. He kind of had Marcus a little, face blocked from seeing the pass, but you could kind of see it. Like I said, just in those little glimpses, you can see where Jeff's throwing really stands out. And if you've got a guy who can throw like that while also running a 4.40, it kind of stands out. But again, small and uncompetitive, I think, would be a little bit of a stretch. I understand where they're coming from on it, but just because it's kind of the flip of the problem, or not problem, but the flip of the issue that Nebraska had in its quarterback room coming into it. You had 6 guys with Power 5 playing experience, and everybody was like, it's a great problem to have. This isn't going to last long. And then it doesn't last long, and now people are grabbing onto the studs of the house right here. Now, I think they like who they've got. And honestly, this coaching staff would probably feel good with Jeff, Heinrich, or Chuba at quarterback right now, whoever it is. And then obviously, going back to it, there's always the chance of Logan and Casey withdrawing from the portal. But I want to make sure I mention that, so that it's mentioned at some place on this live feed, which may or may not be hosted up after it's done going live on our YouTube channel. Oh, blessings on those who watch that entire thing. Yeah, man, I love my phone. I truly do, but I need to do something about its lock screen. It locks too fast on me. Um, I'm not a fan of that. Not a fan of that. All right. Let me go through and check, make sure I'm checking everything right. Let's see. Now, college basketball news. You people didn't come here for college basketball news. All right. All right. Go back and check here. All right. Yeah. The question about kind of reiterating the graduate transfer timelines. I think I've tried to do it a couple times here. Hopefully, hopefully. All right. Looking forward to seeing what that's all about. Graduate transfers aren't bound by the NCAA transfer rule guidelines. Those who graduate can enter the transfer portal at any time. So if you've got someone who transfers at semester, like Casey Thompson did, for example, he could have transferred during winter workouts. He could have transferred at the beginning of spring ball. He could have waited and transferred until after May Day. You know, um, they're just not bound by those same limitations. I think the NCAA implemented the transfer portal as an opportunity for young men and women, regardless of sport, to transfer one time without losing eligibility, and then it allows graduate transfers to, while still maintaining eligibility and playing their sports, to graduate from their respective institutions. And if there's a better graduate program in the field of study that they just earned a degree from, they could transfer there without having to sit out and without having been punished athletically for their decision to move for their better academic opportunities. Hopefully that makes sense. So again, transfer graduates or graduate transfers are not bound by the same deadlines. They could enter the portal at any given time and can transfer at any given time, whereas undergraduates have to enter the transfer portal through the windows established by the NCAA. They do not have to commit or sign or transfer to a school before the portal window closes. It only applies to entry. So the portal closes on April 30th on Sunday. If I were to, because I do have some eligibility left, call me. If I were to enter the portal on Sunday, I would not have to immediately decide what school I'm going to on Sunday. I could take until, I wanted to. I could take official visits into June, like 2024 recruits. Years, what are they? I could take official visits into June if I wanted to. Now, obviously, some coaching staffs are going to say, hey, look, pal, like, let's, time's ticking here. We need you to commit or something right now. So that also comes into play. But timeline wise, you're not bound by that. So hopefully that works. Hopefully, if that bit gets clipped for educational purposes, my stumble on what year it is and what year it's going to be gets cleared up. One can only hope. Is it raining where you are? Because it is certainly droopy out here right now. Oh. Well, this ought to be a good time now that it's up on my time, or now that it popped onto my phone. For those who are willing and able, Nebraska softball is preparing for a they got a pretty good series coming up against Northwestern this weekend. First game starts today, so Husker softball coming at you, Husker baseball action coming at you. They just split a pair of midweek Summit League games, played well against Omaha, a team that they definitely needed to beat to avoid a sweep, and then the bats just went cold. Will Bolt wasn't happy with the mindset on Wednesday. I think that would have been Wednesday against South Dakota State. And now here they are returning to Big Ten play where they really need to find more consistency in the bats again this weekend. Again, Hail Varsity. Drake Keeler has got all of your Husker baseball news going on. Follow him. Make sure you're following him. And then shout out contributor Mariner, contributor Marin Angus Coombs. She does all of our stringing work for Nebraska softball and our coverage there. Also co-host of Behind the Plate with Nate Rohr. And you can follow Nate Rohr doing all the calls with Husker softball over there. So there's plenty of content. Again, Jacob Padilla is going to be out in Central City for the Nebraska scrimmage, volleyball scrimmage this weekend against Wichita State. Follow along there for plenty of updates. The hits just keep on coming, brother. I tell you. Subscribe. I don't know why you don't already. I'm dying here. I'm trying to feed this guy. Come on now. This one comes from Twitter. Do not like it one bit in regards to Casey Thompson transferring. Casey should be the starter. Sims consider my thoughts. Kind of general thoughts. Aside from the ones that nobody really asked for, but they're here to listen to anyway. Again, Casey's a veteran quarterback. He learned the Texas system and then felt he needed to change coming to Nebraska because his opportunity got away from him at Texas through injury or through coaching shuffles, everything that happened there. And then I can tell you firsthand that I think I mentioned this before, so I'm comfortable saying it again. Casey reached out to PJ Walker and Charlie Brewer, former quarterbacks that Matt Rule coached before. This would have been back in November, like the day after Matt Rule was introduced as head coach. So Casey studied. I mean, he knew what he was getting into. He, especially not only Matt Rule coach teams, but Matt Rule coach teams with Marcus Satterfield attached to them. So he knew what he was getting into in terms of quarterbacking scheme and style. He obviously sat in on meetings and winter workouts and everything to get a better idea of this coaching staff and the vision that they had. And then, like I said, he's a graduate transfer, so he could have really transferred at any time after he graduated there in December. But he stuck it out. He's posted numerous things on Instagram announcing, or he had that one that said he'd run it back. That stood out. Oh, sorry. All right. Well, all right. I'll come back to that, Aaron. I'll put a note in that. So he could have transferred at any time. Casey kind of wanted to stick it through up until now, basically. This coaching staff is very high on mobile quarterbacks, people that can run and throw. And as we saw last year, Casey's capable of being a runner, but he certainly doesn't come with 4.4 speed the way that Jeff Sims does. And even at times, some of Casey's most electrifying moments last year when he wasn't heaving it deep for Trey Palmer. I think there was the scamper at home. I want to say that was who would that have been against? Would that have been against Indiana? I'm trying to remember the games off the top of my head. He had a pretty good scamper against Indiana that stood out. And then obviously in Ireland, he had that play where he kind of rolled out to his left, backtracked, spun around, and found Isaiah Garcia Castaneda deep. So he's got some mobility to him, but that is not a part of his game as much as Jeff Sims, as a part of it is to Jeff Sims. And this coaching staff, even Charlie Brewer, PJ Walker, those guys are mobile enough. So Casey decided that he wanted to enter the transfer portal, and I think part of that has to come down to the plans for a quarterback run game, coaches talked heavily throughout the spring about Jeff Sims's his demeanor, calmness, maturity, his mindset at quarterback and behind the pocket, and then also talked about his ability to run. I think in the first scrimmage, in all three scrimmages this spring, quarterbacks were live. Matt Rule announced it to the team the morning of the first scrimmage, and he mentioned afterwards that there were a handful of like quarterback runs and scrambles for big gains. And he said that the defense needed to be better about that, but he also just told them, that the quarterbacks were going to be live earlier that day. They improved, and then you see kind of the dynamic that a quarterback run game brings you kind of stood out. And so however it goes, Nebraska wanted a functional running quarterback whose mobility is more part of their game, potentially, than it might have been in previous years. And I wonder if Casey Thompson, just even coming off of injury and as he's getting back up to full health, he didn't have an opportunity to prove that, or felt like he wanted to be a part of a different system somewhere else. It could be a part of any of it. But that's kind of my overall thoughts. I'm of the general mindset that if a coaching staff has a potential style and a potential mold of a quarterback, especially a quarterback that they like to play with, you're probably going to be more successful playing that kind of quarterback than you are trying to implement somebody else who might not be comfortable in that role. If you're going to try to ask Casey to log 40 rushing yards a game, that's just not going to work, especially for a guy who finished with comfortably in the negative margin for rushing yards last year. It's just not going to work. And then, I think I'm not causation correlation, maybe, I don't know, but the three scholarship quarterbacks that are still in the room, Jeff Sims, Heinrich Haarberg, and Chubba Purdy, are all capable of scrambling. So I think that says something there. I want to get to this comment, but real quick, shout out amendment. Aaron Sorensen will be in Central City with our John Peterson for Hail Varsity for the Central City scrimmage between Nebraska volleyball and Wichita State. So apologies there. All right. Question: why would Matt Rule let the QB room get so thin? I simply cannot get over Casey leaving. I quit watching NFL because of free agency. Is college football going the same way? Well, the first question, why would he let it get so thin? I think it comes down to, I wasn't in the meeting, so I can't tell you this with firsthand reporting confirmation knowledge, but I can tell you that Matt Rule and the coaching staff went in individually and met with every player this week. If they haven't done so, they will do so by the end of this week, maybe potentially by the end of this recording, to explain plans. Not very many players get their, basically like an annual performance review or plan set. So Rule and his coaching staff wanted to meet with each quarterback, each player, Husker, regardless of position, to explain plans. And that was an open forum. It allowed the coaches to explain where they were coming from, a player to potentially see where they're coming from, and maybe have a dialogue that way in a conversation. I think through the portal movement of this quarterback class, I think it became very clear that, especially with Richard Torres, Logan Smothers, those were guys that either coming back from injury or healthy wanted to have a better or closer proximity to the playing field now than they would have had they have stayed for long-term development within Matt Rule's system. Again, going back to something I said earlier in the stream here, these are college kids that, they were studs, star standouts, 3, 4, sometimes 5-star recruits out of high school that haven't really had to sit on the bench for a while. And they think that they're going to come in and win the job right away, or they think maybe they can sit for a year, they'll be fine with that, and then they'll, rise when their time comes. And then after a year in it, at a new place, college, potentially far away from home, they don't like it the way that they thought they might. It just doesn't hit the same way as I thought that it might. So I think through those meetings, I don't think that Matt Rule said, hey, I want to cut it down to 3 scholarship quarterbacks right now. I just think that through those conversations, that's where they ended up at. And like I said before, the quarterbacks in the portal now, especially as it pertains to Logan and Casey, there's always the potential of them withdrawing from the portal, especially Logan after he sees that all the other quarterbacks have entered the portal. I wouldn't put money on it. I wouldn't put money on not happening. Simply mentioning it just for clarity's sake. That is a possibility. And then, is college football going the same way as free agency? It's a really complex question. I think a short answer is yes. A short answer, I believe, is that yeah, you're probably getting closer to that through the transfer portal. You're getting closer to how we see free agency because of movements in and around. Now, I do think that because it is still new, and because if you want to look at it through the player market, I think that now you're seeing more movement, whereas it will peter out, tilt out within a couple of years, because I think you're going to see there are some success stories. Obviously, you've got some high caliber athletes that can just plug and play and go into a different system and thrive right away. Sure. But there are plenty more. I go back to, there are plenty more stories of the person who enters the portal from like Louisville, hypothetically Louisville. There's nobody specifically that comes to mind. I just picked it up because Haley Van Lith is on my timeline right now. So you have someone who commits to Louisville and they think, okay, well, I'm not playing here. Maybe I can play somewhere else. And then they don't like any of the Power 5 standings or Power 5 groups that they're at. Then what? Or you've got somebody from Buffalo who thinks that, I just had a good year at Buffalo, but I'm not really liking Buffalo. I want to get out of there. I'm going to shop the portal elsewhere. Well, frankly, a lot of these teams are going to prefer a fresh recruit that they have multiple years of development with. I mean, would you pick a young recruit that you have so many more years of eligibility with, or transfer from a group of 5 or a different institution with only 2 years of eligibility left? So, and then they end up going D2, D3. I just think there's going to be more stories about that, to where someone who's on the fence might not enter the portal, or they might enter the portal and redact and withdraw. I just think that that's going to slow down in the upcoming years. And then, but at the same time, coaching turnovers happen. I mean, you're going to have programs that decide that they're going to make a change, and they bring in a new head coach who's going to want to bring in all of their people, in the same way that kind of, if Lincoln Riley kind of did it at USC, and now we're seeing it with Deion at Colorado, it's just, what he's doing in Colorado is unheard of. I don't think that will become the norm, but potentially, full-scale roster turnover could happen a little bit more often, which could give, the appearance of free agency. But I'm just also a firm believer in that it's not going to be all hands on deck. It's not going to be it's not going to be like this, like a cavernous wasteland where people are getting 20 some transfer arrivals every single year. I think it happens with coaching turnover, and especially with Nebraska having coaching turnover. This is just how it is. And then even last year, the last year of Scott Frost, they brought in a lot more transfers than he wanted to, because they tried to re-engineer the entire offense. So I think it's just 2 years in a row, especially through a Nebraska lens, where you're seeing more transfer arrivals than they will otherwise. I could be wrong on that, and I'll stand up and admit I'm wrong on that. But I think that's just kind of where that stands right now. It's just extenuating circumstances at this point. Okay. Man, I am. All right. All right. Another question we got popping up here is, how does NIL does and does not impact transferring? Thank you. I thought I did have a good story in the last issue of Hail Varsity on name, image, and likeness. Can I share more on what I learned? Absolutely. I'll revert back to the most recent issue of Hail Varsity magazine that you can get on newsstands now, and you can see at the prestigious Hail Varsity Club in beautiful Pavilion, or La Vista, I guess is La Vista, Nebraska. Stop by, get the Nebraska charcuterie, say hi to the staff, tip your waiter or waitress. Um, I'm I'm always an advocate, or I'm always of the mindset now through my reporting and the people that I talk to, that people use NIL as a boogeyman, or people, shout NIL and point at something whenever something doesn't go their way, or just as a way to rationalize things that happen in a chaotic world such as college football. Um, Nebraska is very well situated. I can tell you right now through my reporting, although I can get into, there's no apparatus right now that schools have to report their NIL deals. The deals have to be reported to the institution school, the school itself, to submit to the NCAA, I believe, or at least to have on record. But there is no anything that has to, like, no checks and balance to make sure that those numbers are accurate and factual to any sort of body. I mean, for instance, like the NFL, you have rookie deals, you have any sort of trades or contract free agency deals, any one of those that happens, that has to be sent with ratification through the players union, and has to be reported to the players union and the players association, and through the NFL itself, through the owners, just so it's reported, so that there is a record of it. There is nothing like that right now with the NCAA. So personally, everything that I hear from the athletes themselves, the agents, potential agents, the schools, the boosters, the collectives, however it may be. And I've had experts that I spoke with for this story tell me the exact same thing. Everything that they tell you as far as numbers go has to be taken with a grain of salt, because it's in everyone's best interest to inflate the numbers. There's no there's no checks and balance to ensure that these are accurate numbers reported. And it benefits the school, it benefits the collective, it benefits the athlete to say that they're all getting more, because then for the player, their stock value, if you will, gets driven up. So any potential new deal that they get is worth more money, or could bring them more money. For the collectives themselves, it appears that they're doing buku business, and that they've really got their stuff together. And potential recruits could see that and say, yeah, I mean, their NIL is working great. I can get me some money going here. And then for the agent themselves, it clearly shows that they can do a really good job if they can get their client a deal like that. So it's in everybody's best interest to have, or to advertise or mention a high NIL number. Not to say that it's not an issue at all. Nebraska is very well situated. The 1890 Collective is the most prominent of the collectives involved, and they are very active in fundraising and working for Nebraska's NIL space right now. But like personally, Matt Davison wouldn't talk to me on the record about it, and like just wouldn't return my calls, wouldn't return my emails, didn't want to talk about it. Him, nobody there to even like kind of do like a fact check on this. I trust Blake and Audie over at Open Doors. They're great people, but it also benefits them to have those numbers that they have. And then they weren't willing to show me, the hard numbers. And I understand that. I totally get where they're coming from on that. But also, again, it goes back to, there's no independent third party to just, have, I want to make sure I get it up over the lower third and the chyron here. There's no bar, there's no fact checking independent bar to ensure that happens. But yeah, like, again, to go back to Bear Alexander, the Georgia defensive lineman who transferred to USC, I can't remember, apologies to whoever's out there, I can't remember what institution or who interviewed him, but there's a story up this morning with him where they asked him about NIL, and he said, I drove a Porsche at Georgia, and I'm driving a Porsche now. Like, it really didn't factor in to my decision. So take for that what you will. I don't drive a Porsche. I drive a Jeep that is about 6 years old now. So far be it for me to tell people to make money or go where it's more advantageous for them. So that's through my reporting and through NIL. And now that we are a couple of years removed from it, I think you are seeing the market almost level out, or at least the market will eventually go through a source of leveling. And then if you talk to economists, this didn't make any of my stories, but because we're hoping to kind of check in on this later on. But if you talk to economists and people who work within the market space, there are future worries as to the sustainability at this level in the college sports marketing place. Not to say that it's not profitable and it won't be profitable. College football, college sports will always be profitable, to be honest with you. That's just how this thing operates. But it's, to this extent, it's a new market. It's still sorting itself out. The market just has a way of working itself out in those instances a lot of times. Good question. We'll steer it back over to recruiting. So, who is the next commitment? I was just speaking with someone else about this actually during the spring game, because Willis McGahee, I knew he was high on Nebraska, and I knew that it was definitely an option for him. I didn't know he was that close to committing to where he would do it before the spring game. And then since then, Ian Flint has committed. Ian Flint was the one that I think for a couple of weeks, I thought basically ever since Gibson Pyle committed at the beginning of April, Ian Flint was one that I thought he's the next one. And then he took his time, but he ultimately committed. And now it kind of leaves Nebraska now in a spot where there's really no conventional next person. There's nobody that really stands out of, like, they're coming to all these visits, they're making all these stops, and it just is a matter of time. Nobody really gives me that impression right now the way that Ian Flint did before. Man, it's a good question. Before I answer it as best I can, I will refer back to our recruiting notebook that we have for those who aren't subscribers to Hail Varsity and are just following this on YouTube, following it afterwards. However you may be encountering this. Hi, my name is Brady. I'm a Virgo, and I'm from South Central, Nebraska. I have a corgi, and he's asleep right now. Every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday evening, we do a recruiting notebook, which is basically the latest happenings, latest storylines, things that any spectrum really of Nebraska recruiting. We had on Sunday, it was the big takeaway of who all the recruits were that showed up at the spring game. And on Tuesday, it was the potential portal arrivals through this transfer portal window that's opening up in the spring. Who are people that Nebraska has their eyes on? And then just yesterday, I wrote a story about Cohen Eccles, a 3-star offensive lineman from down in Texas, down at Katy High. And he's a 3-star now, but I would not expect him to stay a 3-star. I mean, he just picked up an offer from Ole Miss. He's got SEC offers. He's now got more than one Big Ten offer. I know Nebraska means a lot to him, not only because Matt Rule has a good relationship with his head coach and developed a former Katy High offensive lineman into an all-conference selection while he was at Baylor, but because he's pretty honest and upfront. He's got a good relationship with the coaching staff down there in Katy, as well as through Greater Texas. So I did a story on Cohen Eccles kind of being the next, maybe this is the next under the radar kid, because he really didn't have that much attention until he showed out at a couple of camps this spring, and then his recruitment really started to take off. And in all likelihood, you're probably going to see his recruitment take off a little bit more in the summer and at the start of his senior year upcoming. Again, he's a 2024 commit. You can read about it more in Thursday's recruiting notebook. But going back to the next, all caps, next commitment. I don't know what that was all about. I would say, man, it's really tough. It is super tough. What's going to be the next commitment? Man, that's a tough one too, because there's a couple of, all right, I'll take the cop out. I can't say put money on anybody who I'd say is going to be the next one, but I can tell you right now some big names that I think Nebraska is in good position on and can probably be in the thick of recruitment right through the summer. Brandon Baker, the country's #1 offensive tackle, he really likes Nebraska, and Nebraska is in good standings with him. Ainsworth, tight end, Carter Nelson. These are guys that Nebraska's having, even Carter is a homegrown kid that Nebraska's having to fight off Notre Dame, Alabama, and Georgia on. But I think that there's just a little bit more. Nebraska's a constant there. And he was at Nebraska's spring game. I know that he's done his visits and traveled around, but I think that there's a relationship being built there that stands out. Gatlin Bear, I don't know if he'd be a next one, but I know Nebraska's really high on his list. He trimmed his finalists down to four or five, I want to say the other day. I think it was 5 because it was Nebraska, Michigan, Boise State, Oregon, maybe someone else. There's a lot happening in the brain right now, but he's another kid that I think would be a great fit. Now he's got that interesting dynamic because he's going to graduate at semester and then do his 2-year mission, his Latter-day Saint mission for 2 years, and then arrive. Right now, the plan would be to arrive on the spring semester of 2026 so that he doesn't have to automatically redshirt getting up to speed. He can hop into the weight room, the program, and join for spring ball and do winter workouts, conditioning, and then hop in for spring and then do all the summer workouts to potentially be in good shape or better shape for the summer or preseason camp than he would have had he done the conventional 2-year mission over the course of the summer and then arrive, in the summer and in August of the 2026 season. So those are the 3 that stand out to me right now. In all likelihood, I wouldn't say that they're going to be the next one selected, but those are 3 that Nebraska is in a good position for right now. That honestly, any one of those 3 would be pretty good additions to Nebraska's recruiting class. And I'll also give a shout out to Mario Buford, younger brother of Marquise Buford Jr. He's one that Nebraska has stayed in pretty good contact with down in DeSoto. Down in DeSoto, Texas, he just started spring ball because Texas is one of the few states that allows high school spring ball to happen in football. So he's another one that he hasn't really taken a visit lately, which kind of makes me take pause. That's why I don't think that he would be the next one. But I think he's still on Nebraska's priority targets as they try to engineer the defense's secondary for the future going forward in Tony White's system. So that's all I got for that one. Oh, man. More draft prep. Man, Penn State is tearing it up on the recruiting trail too. I think it means a lot. I think that means a lot for the Big Ten in general to do well at recruiting and stand out. Nothing's a monolith. But Michigan and Penn State both having really good recruiting classes right now. Ohio State having a really good recruiting class right now. I think that all kind of stands out. Those are 3 obviously consistent programs in all that they do. So it doesn't surprise me. The coaching staff has been pretty consistent. They haven't had much turnover. They're obviously well proven in pumping guys into the NFL. So that just stands out to me. 4-star safety Peyton Morgan, by the way. Peyton Morgan is another one that he enjoys Nebraska. I mean, they got a lot of those California guys. lot of those California guys that stood out over the spring ball weekend that stood out and really liked Nebraska. So I don't know. That's the thing with this Matt Rule coaching staff. They've got ties everywhere. I mean, obviously you've got the Texas ties. Tony White was a former Group of 5 recruiter of the year at San Diego State. They've obviously got ties to Pennsylvania and all that they have there. Their Northeast ties with E.J. Barthel. Florida, not only with the players that they have in, but Phil Simpson, Evan Cooper. They've got guys down in Florida. And then Marcus Satterfield has kind of Appalachia from his time at Western Carolina, and then South Carolina, and then with the Panthers. I mean, they're all over the place. Donovan Raiola he's got that kind of Mountain West area locked down, and they're bringing those, the guys with Polynesian ties and those Utah guys. And I saw they just had a little bit more, I think, more action. One of those kids tweeted something in recent days about enjoying this trip or enjoying Nebraska. So this recruiting staff it's weird because they obviously have strengths, but this coaching staff they've got something everywhere, which is, I don't know. One of the things as reporting on the head coaching search throughout the fall that really just boggled my mind throughout. One thing I'd be told by agents or people in the coaching market said that the thing about Nebraska and the job itself was just recruiting. That was the big knock. I mean, people saw it as like an albatross of trying to get prominent high school football players to Nebraska to play their college ball. And Matt Rule himself and the people he employs on his coaching staff are just furious recruiters. I mean, what was that? I think it was Tony White that told me, he's like, well, Coach Rule, if you can't recruit, you're not going to be here. So I don't know. I mean, people see the energy that Matt Rule is bringing. People come to spring practice and see the practice style. I think it means a lot for the kids to see what it's going to look like, because anybody can come in and tell you you're the greatest thing in the world and that, we need you to win, all of this stuff. But to actually be in there at practice and to see what it's like, to see what it's going to be like. They're not putting on airs for you. They'll roll out the balloons and do the photo shoots, senior day stuff all for you. But they actually get to see what it's going to be like. And I think that is special for kids. They like to feel special, but they don't like to be lied to. And everybody can, smell a liar. And they like to see that they're going to be treated well within a football program. This coaching staff has a high standard. We saw it when we were at spring ball. They have a high standard. They're very high energy. They're going to coach guys up, and it's going to be hard sometimes. But at the same time, they build a relationship with you off the field that reassures you that everything that happens on the field, it comes from a point of caring and it comes from a point of empathy. And I think at the baseline, if I'm going to get yelled at by a coach, if I get the feeling that coach doesn't care for me, I'm not going to respond in the same way I will if that coach and I have a really good understanding and trust in film study off the field, and that I can really count on that person to shoot me straight, tell me how it is, but also support me if I come for help. So recruits are seeing that. They're doing all that. And I think that in the long run, it's going to benefit Nebraska's recruiting. Plus, it's high school football. A lot of these recruits, they talk, and you're seeing a lot of peer recruiting right now. It doesn't end with committing. I mean, these young men are going to see, it's kind of like the Dylan Raiola thing. Like he comes and visits Nebraska multiple times. He comes and takes an unofficial visit for that junior day. And maybe some other kids aren't going to say, hey, I'm going to go wherever Dylan Raiola goes, but they're going to see, hey, why is he taking so many visits to Nebraska? If it's good enough for his time, maybe it's good enough for mine. And then that gets a foot in the door, and then those kids see what Nebraska's about. Maybe they like the vibe. Maybe they like what's going on. They see themselves in the system. They see themselves playing there at practice and all that. So it's all just, I don't know, it's all cyclical, man. It's all just going to keep going and eventually work itself out. But it's college football too. I mean, shoot. I know Tony Petitti had his press conference this afternoon, or I guess at noon, and I caught a couple bits of it. If I can catch it up on Rewind, I might actually have a story up on hailvarsity.com in the upcoming days. There's just a lot going on right now. But if Tony Petitti comes out and says something like, in the Big Ten, we're mandating jumping jacks, and some kid doesn't want to do jumping jacks, maybe they might. I don't know, but it's college football. Weird things happen, I guess, is what I'm trying to say there. But so it's about 4:00. Paging, any last questions, because this is the time I'm going to turn it over, or about to turn it over. We've been doing this for almost 2 hours now, which is a good amount of time to answer any questions. Keep an eye on the portal. Nobody committed or entered the portal, I should say, as we've been doing this, which, to be honest with you, it's no skin off my back. I'm tired. I woke up early all these mornings trying to do this, but I wanted to give this chance to answer any questions, clear some air, do all of this forum so watchers, readers, subscribers could interact and get their questions solved, especially because it's right after spring ball. The portal window is open. There's a lot of uncertainty, and the NFL draft is happening right now. There's a lot happening. So I wanted to answer some questions, keep an eye on that. But Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbal will have Hail Varsity Radio kicking off here and momentarily. So 4:00, I'll leave you at Brady Oltmans on Twitter, and I'll answer you up there. So go turn on your radios, listen to Elijah and Chris, and tweet at me. And let's brace for an eventful weekend. Later.